Hi, welcome to Women Created and Called Live. I am Beth McGreen-Tran, and I'm so glad that you could join me today. Today, we are going to be talking about presence, and this is the third part in a series that we're doing for 5 weeks. And what this series has been all about is how do we use the 4 keys to connection to create connection in whatever area of life that we want to focus on right now. And so I put myself on this challenge and invited all of you to come along with me and just think about what is an area of your life that isn't quite where you would like it to be, and which area are you wanting to improve right now? So it can be anything. It can be your relationship with God. It can be your relationship with your health and fitness, or your spiritual health, or your mental or emotional health. It can be your relationship with your spouse, or with your children, or with your goals and your vocation and your mission in life. Maybe it is your relationship with finances, or is it your relationship with time? If that is the one for you, make sure you don't miss last week's episode, which was about availability. We talked a whole lot about time and how you can have a better relationship with time, because that is really one of the very first keys to concentrate on when we're talking about creating connection. And as I mentioned in the very first part of this series, in the preparation video, when we do one thing, when we concentrate on improving and growing in one area of our life, it affects pretty much all of the other areas of your life. There is a phrase that's very common in personal development. How you do one thing is how you do everything. And I tend to agree with that wholeheartedly. It's so very true. So, as I said, today we are focusing on presence. So, what do I mean when I say presence? Well, if you go look in the dictionary, you will find a definition that says state or fact of existing, occurring, or being present in a place or thing. And I would just add to that, if we're talking about the present as an adjective, it means, or being present, it means existing or happening now, as in the present moment. So basically, it's awareness and participation, especially mentally, I would argue, in what is happening right now. And so that is basically what we're talking about when we're talking about presence. Are you really here? Are you here with us right now? Are you in the moment? Are you aware of what is around you, your environment, your internal and external environment? And I was jumping ahead just a little bit there and I got a little bit lost. Sorry about that. So, okay, so that's the what. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about presence. Now let's talk about why it's so important to be able to be present. Well, there's a few different reasons. When we are outside of the present moment, this is when what I call storms come up. And these are circumstances, really they're actually neutral, but very often these circumstances don't feel so neutral. They feel stormy and like they can feel like chaos. So when we are not in the present moment, we can get caught up in the storms of the past and in the storms of the future. So maybe if you're focused on the past, maybe something has happened to you, something has happened with someone that you love. And if we're focused there, all kinds of feelings can come up that are not going to feel very peaceful. And the same thing can happen when we are focused on the future. If you're focused on the future, you might have feelings of worry or overwhelm or anxiety or fear. Or here's a big one, and this applies to both the past and the future: helplessness. Have you ever felt that? Have you noticed that if you're focused on the past or on the future, you might feel helpless? I certainly have experienced that lots of times, and there's a reason for that. Because the past has already happened and you can't do anything about it at this point, and the future has not happened yet. So how can you do anything about it right now? Now, that being said, of course, there are things that you can do in this present moment that can help make that future better. Absolutely, for sure. But if you see it turning into worry, it's because you're trying to control something that hasn't even happened yet, and it's not for you in this moment. But you can do some things to turn those thoughts about the future into productive thoughts instead of worry. But that's really a whole topic for another episode, and I'll have to jot that down and take note of that one. Let me know if that sounds interesting to you in the comments, and I will make sure that we include something around that topic in the future. So another reason why we want to live in the present moment, or at least practice being in the present moment as often as possible. I don't know anybody who can do it all the time, 24/7, but it is absolutely a great practice for us. So have you ever noticed that when you are doing something and have you ever had the thought, I am exactly where I'm meant to be, and I am doing exactly what I'm meant to be doing right now in this moment? Have you ever experienced that? If not, I encourage you to look for moments like that, because there is a feeling of incredible peace that comes over me when I think about that. And I've noticed a couple of specific activities in my own life where I am noticing that. And it's, like I said, it's incredibly peaceful. One of those is driving. I notice it when I am driving, especially like on the interstate, because maybe you have a long stretch where you don't have to look for your exit. You don't have to do anything specific or worry about missing an exit or anything like that. But you just know, I'm just driving. I am doing exactly what I'm meant to be doing in this moment. And I just can relax and feel so much peace in that moment. So that's just one example that comes to mind for me. But look for those moments. I encourage you to do that. And here's another thing. If you find yourself practicing presence and you're asking yourself, am I doing what I'm meant to be doing in this moment? And am I in the place? Like, am I where I am meant to be in this moment? And you think, if there is something not so peaceful about that moment when you think of those questions, maybe you're not meant to be there. Maybe you're doing something that is not in line with who you are meant to be, who you are created and called to be. If it's not in line with like I said, with who you're meant to be, then you're not going to feel that peace that I was just talking about. So if that's the case, if you notice that, then that means that that's an invitation for you to shift. Shift where you are, shift what you're doing. Maybe you're around some people that maybe you shouldn't be around. Maybe you're doing something where you are experiencing a near occasion of sin, which means that you're in an environment that could lead you to sin. Pay attention if you're not feeling peace in that moment. It could be because of that. Another reason why we want to practice patience would be that God's grace is available in the present moment. It's not available outside of the present moment. Now, here's a little caveat to that. There are multiple kinds of grace. There is two specifically that I can think of. There's one kind of grace that we receive in the sacraments. For example, in baptism, in First Communion and confirmation, or in ordination, or in marriage. And that is one type of grace. And that's fantastic. And then there's this other kind of grace that I think that we often forget about, or some of us might not even know about it. But I love to talk about this type of grace, which I call the grace of the moment, because this grace shows up exactly when you need it. It doesn't show up ahead of time. So if you ever think, I could never do that thing because I don't know how, because I'm afraid of it, because I have all of this laundry list of reasons why I could never do that thing. Maybe you haven't been meant to do that thing yet. Maybe you don't have the grace to do that thing yet because it's not the moment for you to do it. For example, have you ever felt a nudge from the Holy Spirit when you meet someone, maybe a stranger, and you suddenly, you just know that you need to go up and speak with this person? And like I said, if they're a stranger, that maybe is something you've never done before. Maybe that's something that you haven't experienced before. And then all of a sudden you feel this strong pull to go and speak to that person and just kind of ask them how they are. How's your day going? It's very possible that you haven't experienced that before that moment because you weren't meant to. But now you feel this pull. You have been given the grace to act. You've been given the grace in that moment to do it. So this is also really important to realize because it's important to know that God has given us certain gifts when He created us. And then He's got this other gift that's kind of waiting in the wings for just His perfect timing. And when you put those two things together, and if you've been following me for a little bit, you may have heard me say this. When you take your natural equipment, the gifts that God's given you in creation, and you add it to your grace, your supernatural equipment, really, the grace that He has available for you in the moment, then you are equipped with everything that you need to do His will in that moment. So it's important to be on the lookout for what is God calling me to, and to realize He may be calling you to something that he hasn't quite equipped you for yet, but he will. You get to trust that he will. So how do we receive this grace of the moment? It takes a couple of things. It takes, and actually we're going to get into the how here even more, but it takes a couple of things. It takes preparation, and it takes looking for it. Awareness that it's available and actually looking for it. Because if you don't have those two pieces, you are very likely not going to receive it. Another reason, another why that practicing presence is so important. Presence is necessary for connection to who or what you are intentionally creating connection with in that moment. So we talked last week about availability, which was the first key to connection. It's important for us to set up being available to create connection. Whether that means, if it's you are working on a certain goal and you are creating connection with that goal, maybe you have created availability in your calendar by setting aside time that you are specifically going to be working on that goal. Maybe if you are working on creating connection in a relationship with someone, you are creating availability by setting aside time specifically for being with that person. So being available is the very first step, but like I said, presence is also necessary. When that time comes, when that moment actually comes, and you sit down at your desk to do that work and work on that goal, are you actually present to do that work? When that time comes to be with that person and grow that relationship, strengthen it, and create connection with that person, are you really present with them in that moment? So let's talk a little bit about how you can practice presence. So we just talked about availability. That is the first step. If you don't make yourself available, that's the presence for whatever you are trying to grow in, whatever you're trying to create connection with. It's not going to happen because something will always come up if you haven't intentionally created that availability. So that's the first step. Availability comes before the presence. The next tip that I have for you to create, for practicing presence is to eliminate the distractions, or at least minimize them. Sometimes, things are going to come up, and that's okay. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But when I talk about eliminating distractions, it's important to know yourself. If you know that you are a person that when you sit down to work, you have a tendency to pick up your phone and start scrolling on social media, or you're on your way to do something on your computer. I'm looking up here at my computer screen and all of the tabs that are open. If you know that you're a person who's going to get distracted by the tabs that are open or by having your phone nearby, then there are steps that you can take to eliminate those distractions ahead of time to set yourself up for success. So, for example, you can put your phone way across the room, or in another room would be even better. You can close down all of your tabs except for maybe the one thing that you intend to work on during that time when you have blocked off time to be available to work on that goal. Another example is if you are setting aside time to be with your family, it is a great idea if you know you have a tendency to pick up that phone. Maybe it's charging in the next room during that time period when you have set aside to be with your family. So there's a few tips. Also, one more note about distractions. Sometimes distractions can, well, let me rephrase this a different way. Very often we think of distractions as a bad thing. And I would like to invite you to think about distractions in a different way. Let's reframe how we think about distractions. Because sometimes distractions can be a gift. Distractions can be God trying to get your attention sometimes. For example, if you are a mom and you have planned out your day and you're thinking, okay, during this time, I'm going to be, fixing lunch for the kids or doing the dishes or whatever it is that you have decided, this is the time block when I'm going to be doing that thing. If you have a child that comes up to you and maybe it's a little bit older child and they are ready to talk to you about something important, then that distraction can be an invitation to connect with that child. So that's just one example that just shows you that occasionally a distraction, maybe even more than occasionally, really, if we're being honest, a distraction can be a gift. It can be an opportunity. And instead of thinking, oh, now I'm not going to get done that thing that I planned to do, maybe you get to decide, okay, this is more important in this moment. And I'm going to get to that as soon as I can. I'm going to find another spot on my calendar, if that's what it's going to take care of that task. But right now, God is inviting me in this moment to be present with this person. And really think about it. God sends people across our paths all the time, all day long, all week long, depending on how your week looks. There are people crossing your path all the time, and we get to look at the people who come into our lives as an opportunity and a gift. In some way or another, they are a gift from God. Now, I am actually thinking of, okay, what if this person who crosses your path intends to do you harm? And that is more of a challenge, to think of that as a gift. Something just happened to me yesterday, and this is why I'm thinking of this. And at first, it's so easy to look at, okay, that person had an agenda that was instigated by Satan to stop me from what I was doing. I can think of it that way. And that may be true. But where's the gift, the opportunity from God in that incident, in that moment? Well, there's a couple of things I can think of. I had an opportunity to pray for that person, and I had an opportunity to love them. Really, the prayer is my response and my action to love them. I pray for that person. And it was also an opportunity for me to look at how I responded and for me to feel like I felt like I was knocked down. Like I just didn't want to do anything and I wanted to go off and watch TV. Just do nothing for the rest of the day. Literally, that's pretty much what I did. But it's okay because I was giving myself space to feel and acknowledge that that was not a fun experience. And today I get to get up again. I get to start again. I get to acknowledge that God is calling me to get up and keep going. Satan instigating that incident, he doesn't get to win. God wins. So I'm going to get up and I'm going to try again. Anyway, that was a little bit of a tangent. Sorry about that. But my point is, distractions happen. Sometimes they're a gift. So don't be too quick to dismiss them as a bad thing. But there are some things that if they are keeping you from doing God's will in that moment, if you can think of it ahead of time and do your best to eliminate or minimize distractions, that will really serve you very well. The next tip I have for you for practicing presence is just breathe. Breathing, taking some deep breaths, will help slow down your thoughts and your heart rate and help bring you back to the present moment. So that one's pretty straightforward. The next tip I have for you is to notice, and I did mention this kind of accidentally earlier, but notice both your internal and your external environment. And when I say external, I mean like the people who are around you, you know, the space around you. If you're outside in nature, maybe you're noticing the breeze or lack of breeze. It's been very hot around here lately. But maybe you're noticing the breeze and you're, you know, it is so refreshing because it's a hot day. And that's a moment when you can say, thank you, God, for the breeze. Maybe you are noticing the birds singing or the leaves on the trees rustling or any other sights and sounds that are around you. So noticing your external environment, and I don't know if I mentioned it, but also the people who are around you in that moment. That part is super important. Make sure you notice the people. But you can notice your external environment and then also notice your internal environment. And when I say that, I mean, what are the thoughts that are happening in your head at that moment? And what are the feelings that you are experiencing that are coming from those thoughts? So that is how you can practice presence, by noticing both your external and internal environment. So the next tip is to look for God's grace. So I mentioned this earlier a little bit also. So here's a little prayer. Of course, you can do whatever you want to look for God's grace in the moment. But here's a little bit that I thought of that really helps me. Lord, I know your grace is here in this moment. Help me see it, receive it, and respond to it with love and gratitude. Come, Holy Spirit. I'll repeat that one more time. Lord, I know your grace is here in this moment. Help me see it, receive it, and respond to it with love and gratitude. Come, Holy Spirit. So that's just a little prayer that you can pray to help you look for the grace that's available to you in that moment. And then act. once you have noticed the grace in that moment, remember that grace is given to you for a purpose. It's so that you can do God's will in that moment. Okay, so if you found the grace in that moment, you have looked for it and you see it, or you feel it, then from that act, that is your response to God's gift of grace. And it's important that we do respond to it. So, can you see how practicing presence can help you create connection with the people and things that matter most to you? Now, I want to give you a couple more examples of how this can look in real life. And one example that I have for you is a client that I worked with who was, we were in a training and I was talking about this topic in the training, and she let us know the next day that when her kids came home that day, they came home from school, they're pretty young, there's a lot of chaos, and she was feeling a bit frazzled. As I say, sometimes it feels like storms are brewing around you. And she was feeling not so peaceful in that moment. And then she remembered the training that she had just had that day. And she just said, "Where is the gift? I know God's gift of grace is here somewhere," she's thinking. "Where is the gift?" And in that moment, she was brought back to the present. She was able to take a breath and see her small child who was trying to get her attention. And instead of yelling like she might have in the past, she was able to respond to him instead of, like a knee-jerk reaction of yelling or however else you might react. She was able to respond with gentleness and attentiveness to her small child. And that made a huge difference, not only for her and that child, but think of how that affected just the environment of their home. Because if she had yelled, the other children would have picked up on that also, and that could have caused things to be even more chaotic. And it would have affected the rest of their day also. But instead, it was a more calm experience, more peaceful. Another example of this, of how this looks in real life, is, how I mentioned if you are working on a goal and you have set aside the time to work on that, maybe you're sitting down at your desk, or maybe you're doing a gardening project or something, whatever it is that you want to complete. Or here's one that comes up sometimes. A sister of mine wanted to clean out her closet, and I told her applying these 4 keys to connection can help her with that project also. Anyway, you know how I was saying, if you have set aside the time, and that is practicing availability, and then you want to practice presence, so you need to ask, okay, what is it specifically that is going to be my task during that set amount of time? And that will help you be present to that task, especially if you have decided ahead of time and you're making yourself available for it. But when you practice presence and you are really focused on that task during that time, this will increase your productivity because you have planned ahead of time and eliminated or minimized the distractions. So you will get more done in that, even if it's a small amount of time, you will get more done during that time than you would have otherwise if you were not practicing presence. So obviously, if you're able to get more done in those small amounts of time, then that will help you reach your goal much faster. And when I say goals, also think vocation, think mission. Sometimes goals, or the word goals, can get a bad rap. I've noticed this, that sometimes some of us think of a goal and we think of, something that is self-serving or selfish or ambitious, but not in a good way. And so I want you to also think, when I say the word goal, I am talking about a smaller piece of your vocation and your mission, whatever it is that God is calling you to. So a goal is just sort of like I said, a smaller piece of that. And one more example. When you are practicing presence, especially in the workplace or with strangers, think about that. When you are communicating with someone, whether it be a coworker or a stranger, and you are fully present in that moment with them, it actually helps the other person feel seen and loved and like they matter in that moment. And when you do that, when you are present with them in that way, you are being a mirror of God's love to them, because that's exactly the way that Jesus would interact with them. He would be fully present with them as he's talking with them. So even if you did nothing else in this connection challenge that we're doing for these 5 weeks, scratch that. I want you to do all of it. But today, one action that you can do today immediately is practice being fully present with whoever you are talking with. Just lock eyes, be fully present, and think, I see you and I love you. And what you are saying to me right now is so important. You matter. You can say that to them verbally or just think it, but also be paying attention to what they are sharing with you, because they do matter. So that is what I have for you today. And I just want to invite you for additional support and accountability when it comes to practicing presence, or if it's about availability or connection in general. Or maybe you just want to know, how can I be the woman that God has created and called me to be? How do I discover who that woman is? How do I get to know that natural equipment that I was referring to earlier? How do you get to know your natural equipment? And how do you practice receiving that supernatural equipment? God's grace. I can help you with that. So please reach out to me if you would like additional support and accountability in any of those areas. I am a Christian general life coach, so we can apply these principles to every area of your life. Whatever is happening, let's chat about it and let's see how I can support you. You can leave a comment with this episode, or you can reach out to me on social media. I'm at Women Created and Called on Facebook and also on Instagram. And you can try to email me, and if it doesn't get through, please try again. But the email is beth@womencreatedandcalled.com. And I look forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you again for joining me. And until next week, God bless you and all those that you love. Bye.